Hello, my name is Dick Hatch. My name is Dick. Maybe I should turn this thing off. Well, anyway, I'll hold it out here.
Try it again. I adjusted it. Try it one more time.
The subject of my memoir is a gridiron hero. And I graduated from Bowdoin College, a small college in Maine, not known for its football prowess. I wasn't recruited for its football team because my high school didn't have a football team. However, I did sign up for the football team my freshman and sophomore years, and in my sophomore year, I was assigned to the junior varsity team. My only talent was that I was big, 6 foot 2 inches and 210 pounds. I was assigned to play the position of right tackle in the line. The junior varsity played a 6-game schedule against junior college and private preparatory schools. Our team was winless up to the last game, and I hadn't played in any of them. I occupied a position at the end of the bench, which I filled with distinction. The last game of the season was an away game against Hebron Academy, a private preparatory school. In the morning of game day, I boarded a chartered bus and took a seat next to our coach's brother, who was a starter at right tackle. When the bus eventually arrived at Hebron Academy, the team was led to a locker room some distance from the playing field. There, we changed into our game uniforms, and unlike prior games, I had my ankles taped. That was a good sign. I thought, maybe I'll get a chance to play. The game was scoreless until late in the fourth quarter, when Bowdoin scored a touchdown but missed the extra point. I remained on the bench the entire game until I heard the coach yell, "Hatch, get your hat!" The coach referred to football helmets as hats. The coach shouted to me, "Go in at right tackle for Sebastianski, and don't let Hebron Academy tie the score. And there's not much time left." After the Bowdoin JV touchdown, the Hebron Academy team found itself deep in its own territory. I ran onto the field and faced a Hebron Academy team lined up and ready to go. Across the line of scrimmage, the Hebron Academy linemen looked tired, but not ready to give up. Hebron's quarterback received the ball and faded back to look for receivers for his pass. Partly because I was fresh and not tired, I was able to slip off the blocks of the opposing players, and my route to tackle the quarterback was clear. I could see his face. He had stopped looking for receivers and was looking at me. Did I see fear in his face? Just as I was ready to wrap my arms around him, I felt a thud against my chest, and instead of wrapping my arms around the quarterback, my arms were bracing my fall to the ground. The quarterback had stiff-armed me and run for about 20 yards before my teammates were able to bring him down. Hebron Academy's offense rolled down the fields, mostly through its passing attack, and was about 15 yards away from a touchdown when they ran a play in my direction. I was unable to fend off their blockers, but as I was falling to the ground, I saw a surprise. A loose football was not far from me on the ground, and it was rolling my way. I crawled to reach it, but something was holding me back. But I did reach the football, grabbed it with both hands, and brought it close to my body so that I was laying on it. I heard a whistle and the referee calling out, "Bowdoin's ball." I realized that I had recovered a Hebron Academy fumble. Our coach sent in instructions to our quarterback to take a knee on the next 4 plays. A horn sounded and the game was over. The Bowdoin JVs had won. The bus trip home was enjoyable. My teammates jokingly referred to me as the hero of the game. next?
No, I'm not.
Oh, Victor's next.
Hello? Yeah. I'm gonna put this up here and answer. This one was called An Adventurous Weekend at Old Ocean Isle. Ocean Isle, which is in eastern North Carolina on the island, was sparsely built up after World War II, its growth being inhibited by its rudimentary access. The inland waterway was traversed by a small cable-pulled ferry, which accommodated either 2 cars or 1 car and a trailer. Can you hear me all right by now?
Yes.
Another restraint was the terrible plague of no-see-ums, breeding in the swampy band and pools of stagnant water on the waterway side of the island, especially notorious when the wind blew from the west. How such small creatures could have such a vicious bite is a wonder. In about September 1954, a Category 4 hurricane named Hazel blew in from the Caribbean. Ocean Isle had less than a dozen elevated homes and 1 small motel before Hazel, and some of those intrepid people decided to have a hurricane party and stay put to ride out the hurricane. Well, Hazel grew to 128 miles an hour and hit Ocean Isle head on with an 18-foot storm surge. After Hazel, there were no houses and 1 much damaged motel left. After Hazel, there were of the 19 partying group, only 2 survived. And these by floating on a mattress and ending up in the swamps across the waterway, way inside the waterway. Despite this catastrophe, Ocean Isle was again starting to build up and develop. Well, for many years, the only access was by the ancient cable-pulled ferry. We knew about the island from a friend and decided to take our one in a year weekly vacation there, as it had a nice beach and good fishing access areas. I had made a nice 16-foot boat from a crisscross kit and equipped it with a little 5-horsepower Westman outboard motor, which was adequate to propel it, the light boat, against the strong inland waterway currents. Loading all outdoor gear, tackle box, rod and reels in the open cockpit, and stowed the life preservers under the covered prow of the boat. Now that's preamble. My mother-in-law, Nana, who must be prescient, appeared unexpectedly the day before our departure, complete with suitcase and beach paraphernalia, and full of good spirits. I made it abundantly clear to everyone, to each and every one, that each individual was personally responsible for placing their own suitcases in the station wagon before we left. The cargo area was filled to seat top level, and our Irish Setter champion old boat mounted atop the gear with his long legs fitted comfortably down between the suitcases. two kids in the back seat, my wife and myself and one child between us in the front seat, an old boat perched in the back with a nice panoramic view out. Everything went well until we got near Lumberton. There we stopped to use the bathroom and get some gas. All except Nana, who stayed in the car. I came back first and took old boat for a walk. When we returned, we thought all were in the car and waiting. We traveled on and progressed about 30 miles down the highway when I said something was wrong. I asked, "Where's your grandmother?" I don't hear her. They checked around and exclaimed, "Nana's not here. She must have gotten out by herself and didn't return." We thought she had stayed in the car with me, with Bo. I wheeled around, trailer and all, sped back to the gas station. There, standing in the doorway, with an indignant look on her face, was Nana. No words were spoken. We passed Charlotte and arrived at the picturesque old ferry and rode across with a car in the waterway with a car and trailer. We finally arrived at our destination. I said, "Now, you all take your own suitcases and stuff to your designated rooms. I'll take mine and your mama's and all the rest of the equipment into the house or porch." Everyone busied themselves unloading the wagon. No, the wagon and trailer were finally empty. "Where's my suitcase?" the exasperated Nana asked. Both my wife and I replied, "We don't know. Everyone was supposed to put their own suitcases aboard and be responsible for their stuff. Didn't you put yours in the car like I told you?" She said, "No, I put it in the hall by the stairs for you to carry out." I never went back in the house. My wife informed us that we had left a house key with our next door neighbor, Mr. Walters, and that he might retrieve Nana's suitcase and put it on a bus. He did, and the suitcase arrived at the bus station in Charlotte on time and intact. The suitcase was never mentioned again. The next day was sunny, with a strong offshore wind. I was working on some fishing lines when I heard a loud, disturbing cry. "She's out there! She's out there!" It was our next door neighbor. He informed us he could not swim and thought I might launch my boat into heavy surf and go rescue his mother-in-law, who was drifting who had drifted beyond the surf, had gotten on a large inner tube and was blown out rapidly by the wind. When she tried to put her feet down, the water was too deep. She panicked and was able to get the tube under her left arm pit, but it was then upright and acted like a sail for the wind to rapidly carry out to deeper and deeper water. The surf was a little bit too rough for me to launch my little boat, so I put on a life jacket and took another one under my hand to assist in the rescue. My wife was frantic, saying, "Don't go out, you've got children." I told her I've got to. She's drifting away fast and in a panic. I had taken life-saving along with swimming courses while in Chapel Hill, and I've been around water all my life. all my life on the Pasquotank River, and was a competent swimmer and knew how to approach and rescue a panicked person, I thought. She was about 100 yards offshore by then, white as a sheet and hanging on to that large inner tube and blowing up further by the minute. Carrying my extra life preserver, which I hooked over my arm, and wearing a life jacket myself, I launched through the surf and into the deepening ocean and began to swim to the distressed woman. I finally reached the lady. She was short and fat and beyond reason, never speaking or understanding a word. I approached her from the head region and placed the life preserver under her I had under her right armpit. Then I was able to get the tube somewhat under her head and chest. I wasn't about to get anywhere she could grab me, so I went to her feet and asked her to hold her legs stiff so that I could push her to shore. And then she could assist me by holding her legs stiff. Every time I pushed her feet, she would just flex her knees and hips. I pushed her whole flaccid, collapsing mass toward shore, cussing her at every push. I mean, yelling my cusses. Well, I finally got her back to the shallow water, then through the breakers and into the backwash. Several people, including the guys who had come looking for me, came rushing out into the water and I let her go. They all came towards me and thanking me, but nobody paid any attention to the rescued old fat lady that I had assumed they would. I walked out of the ocean with them following and babbling. I looked back and to my horror and surprise, the lady had no one near her, had fallen in the surf, and was drifting back out into the ocean. I said a few ugly words, and then the congratulatory mob ran back out, pulled her up, and walked her in. She was so exhausted she could hardly stand or walk. They all went back to their beach house, and that ended that ordeal. We were still rather impecunious. They didn't have any money. And paying for a house and car, and raising 3 children. Abby came along later. I didn't expect any reward or fame, but I hoped they'd maybe buy me a few pounds of the plentiful fresh shrimp as a gesture of gratitude. Well, they didn't. But I had one hell of an adventure. And, you know, all the time out there, I sensed how deep and dangerous the ocean was. But I never thought about sharks. I think my angel was watching over me. Amen.
You can sit down if you want.
Yeah, this is easier. Move it a little bit closer to the line up there. Where is,
I think you're on it.
is it on?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. Hi, I'm Dee Hatch, and another member of the Memoir group. And this is what I'm about to read you is part 2 of a 4-part memoir that I've written about my first real job working in a drugstore called Ecker's Drugstore in Corning, New York. The first chapter described how I got hired, and then the second, it talks about the trials and tribulations that I faced when I first got there. So, on my first day at Eckerd Drugstore, I had a lot to learn. I had to learn how to run that enormous brass buttoned cash register. The trick to wrapping purchases in package, because my boss didn't believe in bags except for very small pills, and discovering the general layout of the store, which was a long aisle from the front to the door and with counters on either side all the way to the back. Beyond that was the counter where the pills were counted out and special ointments were compounded. Here's what I expect of you, my employees, Mr. Eckerd said. Always greet everyone entering the store, whether you ask whether you can help them, and look them straight in the eye and smile. Make them feel welcome. I soon found out, never ask them how they were feeling because they would probably tell you in detail. That wasn't as easy for me. At age 11, I had a big growth spurt of 5 inches in one summer, so that I came back and I was 5'9" tall in height, towering over my classmates when I entered the school in that day. I was very awkward and shy and terrified and tried to stoop a little bit and look down. But I wanted to succeed in this job and quickly found that if I was behind those counters, I had no problem looking people in the eye and being cordial. And after a time, I didn't even need the counters to help. It was also good for my posture. Mr. Eckerd was a big believer in physical fitness. Paul Bunyo, who was the stock clerk for Eckerd's and was hired about the same time I was, would also have a tendency to slump. So every time we did, he'd remind us to stand straight, put your shoulders back, and at the end of the first year, our posture was greatly improved. One of the most helpful employees was Eddie Rose. Eddie was our stock man, and he had a photographic memory and knew exactly where every one of the thousands of items was located. He was my go-to man when I didn't know where to find something. After I had been there for a couple of weeks, Eddie pulled me aside and instructed me on how to make points with my boss by giving a sales talk. As an example, he used the squiv angled 1600 toothbrush. People will ask for a toothbrush. We have lots of toothbrushes, but Mr. Eckerd makes 1 penny more on this one, Eddie said, and it's worth it. There are 1600 bristles. They're soft, but they reach between your teeth, and it's angled like your dentist tool. And when brushed, angled that way, it's easy to. It was difficult to reach in places where you couldn't before. He went on and handed me a sheet with all the details. I couldn't wait for somebody to come in that drugstore and ask for a toothbrush, and a few days later, someone did. A man came in and said, I'd like to buy a toothbrush. Oh, certainly, right this way, I gestured as I led him to the back of the store where the toothbrushes were. On the way, I extolled the features of the squiv angle 1600. Before we got there, my customer said, gee, that sounds great. I'll take 2, one for me and one for my wife. But once we got there, I learned another important lesson about salesmanship. Always check your inventory. There were only 2 squiv angle toothbrushes there, and they were both blue. No doubt Eddie had been busy selling and pushing the toothbrushes as well. I thought, oh my, I'm going to lose the sale. I offered to go back and see and check out and find out if there was a new order. Then I remembered they made a smaller version of the squiv angle 1600 for children and people with smaller mouths. I rushed back, had a big smile, looked the man straight in the eye, and said, "Sir, does your wife have a mouth as big as yours?" "What?" he said. "Well," I explained, they make them for children and people with smaller mouths. Maybe you could put a Band-Aid on one of them." "Just give me the 2 blue toothbrushes," he mumbled. I shut up, found a bag big enough to hold the 2 brushes, and he paid me in cash and rushed out. I'm not sure he ever came back again, but he certainly avoided me. But I did, after all, make my first sales talk, and the customer walked out with 2 toothbrushes instead of 1. Another time, a man came in and asked to buy a bottle of bay rum rubbing solution. When I asked Eddie where it was, he said, "Oh, ask him if he wants the flavored or the unflavored kind." Before Eddie could stop me, I rushed out and asked the man which he preferred. "Oh, I didn't know it came that way," my customer said. This time, Eddie came out and apologized. Another time, I gave the wrong prescription to a customer when we had orders from 2 Smith families at the same time. Fortunately, the second Smith arrived shortly afterwards, and we were able to notify the other customer in time. And after that, I double-checked every order, twice. Over the 5 years I worked there, I dusted my way around the store at least 3 times, encountering anything from powdered bee stings for arthritis to printing paper for photography. At Eckers, I bought my first camera, a Brownie Hawkeye, and fell in love with photography. Mr. Ecker let me take home all the cameras one at a time, and I sold a lot of cameras as a result. And after I graduated from college, at least 5 of my first jobs, which I was hired for, were due to my knowledge of photography as well as writing.
Before we start, I have to acknowledge that Patricia has changed her name to Priscilla. So if you see Priscilla running around, say hello to her. This is the story of the plane ride. The order was to move the 508th Airborne Regimental Combat Team from Fort Campbell, Kentucky to bases in southern Japan. As a new corporal assigned to the headquarters battery, we were to move with our regiment to Kumamoto, Kyushu, Japan, to Camp Wood, a former Japanese officer training camp. The remainder of the regiment was to locate to other bases in southern Japan. We were to accomplish this mission using one of the Air Force's newest and biggest cargo airplanes, the C-124. It was a very, very big plane. It had 4 engines and a cargo body that could hold 222 fully equipped airborne soldiers and all their gear. It was a two-story plane with stairs leading from the upper level to the bottom level. In orientation training jumps that spring, we tried the system whereby the bottom half would jump out over the drop zone and the upper half walked down the ladders and straight out the door. The upper floor paratroopers hooked up their parachute harnesses on the way out. We later wondered why someone didn't forget to hook up, but they did. So it was successful. Our scheduled route was from Fort Campbell, Kentucky to a stopover in Travis Air Force Base in California and another stopover in Hawaii, and then on to Japan. That was the planned route. The trip was to take about 48 hours of flying with stops for refueling and pilot changes. The flight started out on time, and along with a whole armada of airplanes, away we went. I was assigned to a seat just over the wing. Holy smokes, my eyes. You cannot imagine how uncomfortable a canvas seat can be unless you've been in it for about 24 hours. Our first stop was at Tinker Field, Oklahoma. We stopped to check out a faulty engine. It was a harbinger of things to come. After a couple hours of repair work, we took off again and headed for California. We got to Travis Air Force Base, and it was decided to change out that faulty engine. Several hours later, we were airborne headed to Hawaii. Our trip to Hawaii and our ground time there was a routine, and we thought that everything was going well. We got out of the plane in Hawaii and were given 2 hours of ground time while the plane was refueled and pilots were changed out. We took off in the darkness and headed for Japan. About mid-morning, we were about at the point of no return between Hawaii and Wake Island. The pilot calmly announced that he had feathered one engine. In people talk, that means he shut it off. He said that the remaining 3 engines were enough to get us to Wake Island, where we could get a new engine. About an hour later, at about high noon, we felt a sort of shudder and a jolt, and a change in altitude. The pilot came back on and announced that a second engine had failed, and we were definitely heading for Wake Island. After things settled down and the plane continued to fly, we started to relax a little. About 5 minutes later, one of the crew chiefs came up to my seat and told me that he was placing 2 5-gallon water cans next to my seat. He went on to say that in the event we had to ditch, I was to take the 2 water cans, walk out on the wing where there should be rubber life rafts. Yes, sir, I said, and continued to sit in my seat. Now on high alert, I looked around, and then I noticed that out the window of the plane, I could see 2 Navy PBY, that's Air Sea Rescue machines, flying just off our wing and obviously escorting us to Wake Island. This time I moved the water cans a little closer to my seat and held the handles just to be ready. Well, we made it to Wake Island, and they changed out both engines. We got out of the plane very relieved and tired, some from the flight, some from fear. We relaxed and were told we could swim on the beach. This was 1955, and the Wake Island beach was still littered with rusted ships and guns that the island defenders and the Japanese invaders had left behind. About 6 hours later, we reboarded the airplane and headed for Japan. We had no more incidents and landed safely in Sasebo, Japan. We got off the plane, recovered our gear, and boarded the train for Kumamoto. A very long, tiring, scary plane ride indeed. The end.
I'll get it. That's right. This right here. Shut off after a while. Get it back on for us.
Testing one more time.
I'm Kit Gauldy, and the name of my memoir is I, Granny. No thanks, I'd rather keep my sanity. That's what I told my kids when they suggested I get an iPhone or a smartphone or BlackBerry, any of these trendy devices that would enable me to keep up with my technically advantaged grandchildren. I felt no need to indulge myself in the luxury of texting my friend in South America, listening to bluegrass, playing Scrabble, and watching a video of my great-grandchild's birthday party. Well, if not simultaneously, at least in the same place, using the same little slip of a gadget. I had heard about bugs and listened to my friends complain of having information disappear into an iCloud, never to be seen again, or missing a scheduled medical appointment because it was entered on the wrong app. I've learned not to be caught up in the frenzies of another generation. There's a certain comfort in not knowing, caring, or needing the newest technological wonder. All of this accumulated wisdom went out the window when my husband Claus presented a case for buying an iPhone. My disbelief was understandable, since Claus had resisted a simple cell phone for years. When he finally succumbed, he managed to leave it on his desk, or if he did take it with him, he rarely turned it on. Didn't want to run the battery down, he'd say. He became acquainted with the workings of this amazing new instrument during a trip to the hardware store, where he ran into an old acquaintance who, as luck would have it, had recently become the owner of an Apple iPhone. During his 10-minute stay in the store, the acquaintance enthusiastically demonstrated various functions of the device, making every bit of the magic seem as simple as a flick of the finger. Claus's explanation for this sudden change had to do with his concern for my comfort. I would be able to make phone calls, have to-do lists, and remember notes without writing. This was important because several years before, my fairly active post-retirement life took a downward slide when I suffered a stroke. In spite of improvement through a variety of therapies, I retained some irritating reminders of that earth-shaking event. I still can't write anything, and my aim on the keyboard is horrible. The thought of being able to casually say, "Call David," and then speak to my son without lifting a finger seemed too good to be true. With this incredible device, I would be able to compensate for any shortcomings by enlisting the aid of Siri, a computerized angel of sorts, available at the famous finger flick for endless information, such as location of the nearest fast food eatery or where to rent a tractor. "It's just the thing for you," Claus announced, and proceeded to tell me his plans for our future in the 21st century world of technology. I was shamefully hooked and completely fascinated by 3 words in his presentation: voice activated and Siri. 2 days later, we were in the phone store after rigorously researching the product on the internet, reading consumer reports and asking friends who had no idea what we were talking about, but offered to ask their grandchildren about the 4S model of the iPhone. Before long, we knew without a doubt that we needed 2 iPhones, one for Claus and one for me. Exactly 3 hours after entering the phone store, we had completed the transaction, changed providers, signed contracts, purchased a few accessories, and listened to the salesman tell us how lucky we were. Certain that we had made the right decision, Claus and I headed home to begin our new stress-free life, where communication with each other and the rest of the world would be ours with that mere flick, or perhaps a swipe of the screen. Magicians' illusory feats may seem effortless until we try them ourselves. After spending half a day seeking out from the 155-page downloaded instruction manual just how to change the picture from a sidewise to upright presentation, we felt duped. But this didn't last for long, because after another hour or so of intense study, we were able to activate the phone. Too late to call anyone, we celebrated our victory alone with a phone call and a text message to each other. The iPhone is amazingly swift. A mere touch brings forth immediate and simultaneous change, not always asked for. In fact, the untrained are certain to experience unexpected results from their efforts. After 3 or 4 days, I was able to feel satisfaction at my accomplishment. I had found Siri, the magic voice who purports to listen to verbal commands and make things happen. I did it. I engaged her and practiced wildly. I was able to find all the Chinese restaurants in the neighborhood, but was stymied when I attempted to enter names of contacts, friends, and businesses that I would be calling, and could not figure which of my many passwords I was expected to use. Nothing would satisfy Siri. I spoke slowly, and she cut me off before I was finished. When I talked faster, she didn't understand me. When I attempted to explain my problem, she answered, "Really?" I didn't know that robots, or whatever she is, could be so snippy. I gave this up in favor of the calendar. If I could only get my appointments and events written down correctly and legibly, life would be manageable. First, I'd have to get on the right page and the right date. Mysteriously, the selected pages kept disappearing, only to be replaced by the familiar stock market tip. My frantic call for help was met with, "Sorry, I can't help you." I was becoming angry and decided to solve the problem myself rather than depend on a fake person with a mean streak. When I finally found a clear page, a Thursday with times listed down the west side, I began. 9 a.m. feed neighbor's cats. Shoe repair. The stilted voice interrupted. "What time is your appointment at shoe repair?" "I don't know," I said to myself, and then to her, 11 a.m., 12 noon physical therapy, 1 o'clock shopping. The voice again. "Don't you want to cancel something? You have way too much." That did it. My first reaction was to tell her that I didn't hire her to criticize my lifestyle, nor did I appreciate her disappearing when I needed her. But then I realized that I could rail on for 10 minutes only to find her disconnected. If for a chance she did listen, she'd probably respond with, "Really?" and I'd have another adrenaline rush or worse. We spoke a different language, Siri and me, but it was her territory, and if I wanted to play with her toy, I'd have to learn her rules. It's tough because my aging brain resists new learning. However, with the help of my tech-savvy children, my fast learner husband, and the 155-page downloaded manual, I decided to give it a try. This is not the end of the story. The computerized world has changed, expanded, and affects our everyday life in many ways. Hacking has replaced eavesdropping, and Cortana and Alexa bring some competition to Siri. Even the ordinary senior citizen user cannot ignore such influences. Personally, I replaced my fear of the unknown, which was directed toward all computerized devices, with a full-blown addiction to word games. So far, I've been able to resist social media, but wage an ongoing battle with TMI, too much information, largely because of Google. However, I will admit to enjoyment beyond the gift of communication that comes from modern technology. And that's when I hear my grandkids bragging to their friends, "Granny is cool."
Do you want to see? Here, I'll space it. Yeah, that's fine, I think. My name's Sharon Jeffers, and the name of this is Tehachapi, 1952. On July 21, 1952, I was a 13-year-old living with my parents, my 7-year-old sister Holly, and our boxer dog Duchess. We lived in a small stucco ranch-style house built on an acre subdivided from a walnut orchard in Canoga Park, California. My dad was a recently promoted lieutenant for the Beverly Hills Fire Department. His station was about 15 miles from our home. Dad worked 24-hour shifts, and today was the day he was going to work. My mom and sister slept in, but I liked to get up and have breakfast with my dad. It was 15 minutes private time that wasn't easy to find, as my dad had his fire department job and a business he ran with another fireman on the opposite rotation. This morning I woke to a jolt. My first thought was Duchess had jumped on the bed, but then I heard her making a strange bark howl noise and knew she was still in her bed in the laundry room. A second jolt felt like a train car coupling with a new engine. My sister continued to sleep, but I got up and walked to my parents' bedroom. The floor beneath me felt like a storm-tossed boat. The closet door swung free and created an obstacle for me. As I reached my parents' bedroom, I saw my dad standing at the window. The sky was a bright blue neon light as the electric lines arced. The explosion of transformers sent sparks flying, and we heard a crashing sound from the other end of the house that was rhythmic, moving with the waving floor. It sounded like a battering ram. I heard some glass break. My dad sent me back to my bedroom to get my shoes. My mom was right behind Dad, and they woke Holly, and we all walked on the rolling floor towards the center of our house, bracing ourselves with hands on the wall to the location of our safe room, or in this case, our safe hall. It was so frightening. "What is happening?" I asked. My parents answered in unison, "Earthquake, we're having an earthquake." It wasn't like any earthquake I'd experienced. My dad retrieved Duchess and the portable radio from the laundry room and found the broken glass, empty canning jars. The only light we had was one flashlight. The ground finally quieted, and I went with my dad to survey the outside of the house. Dawn was arriving, and the light was welcome. We had no broken water or gas lines. Strangely, the canning jars broke, but none of the good crystal or china did, and we remembered that every holiday dinner we celebrated ever after. And that battering ram, it was our 1949 Mercury that my dad always parked in neutral without the emergency brake. With each heave of the floor, the car would roll forward into the wall, common to the house and garage. Then it rolled back to the garage door with another crash. A 4x4 set on the floor as a stop for the wheels of a previous car kept it from doing real damage. It sounded like a battering ram because it was one. The bumpers had scratches, eventually buffed out. The garage door was fixed, and Dad changed the parking protocol. Beverly Hills Fire Department dispatcher called to gather staff, who would come in late or not at all, and who would come in early. One good piece of news, they had power, and the meat in our freezer found a temporary home at Station 2. We had no idea how much damage had been done, how much of the city had been involved, what roads were closed or should be, what dams compromised, and how about building failures. We had our radio, but the only station we could get was the powerful X station in Tijuana, 100 miles south. And if they did have information, it would be en Espanol. My dad was off to work as the sun was coming up. It was going to be a very hot day with no electricity, therefore no swamp cooler. My mother fixed breakfast, and we kept an eye out for the dining room ceiling light that was very sensitive to the movement of aftershocks. Some were strong and rolling, so we'd move back to our safe spot. Others were sharp thrusts, and in no time they had passed. Duchess preferred the hall to venturing out into the rest of the house. We had only a few batteries for the radio. We had water, hot and cold, and gas for cooking, and we had to assume the power would be off for a long period, so our meals would come from anything that didn't have much fresh time left. Wires were down in our neighborhood, so we didn't leave our yard. My mom used her neighborhood network to get the lowdown on what was going on in town. The mailman knew everything. The grocer's wife was also a good source of information. Their store was damaged and broken plate glass windows, cans, and bottles were scattered around. And without power, they were going to lose a lot of perishables. The drugstore opened only the pharmacy, and they too were worried about power. Chimneys collapsed on a number of homes in Canoga Park. The phone remained operational. No one was hurt. Finally, KFI, the Los Angeles 50,000-watt clear channel radio station, had information and could tell us what had happened. A very strong earthquake, 7.3, had occurred with an epicenter near Tehachapi, a small town in the Mojave Desert. 12 people were killed and many had been injured. Only the West San Fernando Valley had been seriously affected in Los Angeles County. Kern County suffered all the casualties and most of the property damage, including a fire in an oil field and property damage at the women's prison that required prisoners to sleep in tents. We waited for the evening newspaper, delivered on time, to give more information. The electricity was unreliable for about a week, and aftershocks, some very strong, continued for months. The telephone service was never interrupted. Duchess refused to sleep in the laundry room ever again.
I'm Lee Hammond. My piece is entitled, "That Boy Done Got Blowed Up." Growing up on the farm in the 1930s with 3 brothers and 2 sisters involved a lot of hard work, but provided many opportunities for mischief. Ideas for entertainment had to be created in our own minds, and in most cases required construction of our own toys and playthings. The textile plant down the river provided discarded gear wheels with which we built our wagons. We boys built a small dam across a small creek and built a small boat to be used on the pond. We would play baseball with neighbor kids in the pasture on Sunday afternoons, and we'd grab the horses by the manes and jump on and ride around without bridle or saddle. These were but a few of the creative ways we filled our time when not working. Our father had a Civil War muzzle-loading rifle that still had a streak of blood on the butt where it had been used in hand-to-hand combat. The rifle was brought home by one of Dad's uncles. Each Christmas, Dad would get the container of black powder out, measure out the proper amount, and pour it into the rifle barrel, tamp in a wad of paper, and let each of the boys shoot it, which produced a huge bang. Incidentally, we always had fireworks at Christmas rather than the 4th of July, when we didn't have time to be celebrating. One day when Dad was not home, my oldest brother Luke decided to get the black powder out and make a stick of dynamite to blow up the red clay bank by the road. He got some newspaper, carefully poured a generous stream of powder across it, and rolled it tightly into the explosive device. Then Luke poured a small stream of powder along a long piece of paper and rolled that into a fuse. We all, along with a bunch of neighboring kids, went down to the road and bored a hole in the bank, stuffing the explosive device into the hole, and tamped loose clay around it. Luke was going to light the fuse and cautioned everyone to get back, this bank's going to blow up. He lit the fuse and retreated to a safe distance himself. The fuse spit and sputtered along the roll of paper and suddenly stopped. Luke decided to go up to the fuse and blow on it in an attempt to reignite it. And this is a fellow who was a physics professor later in life. Well, it did ignite, but rather than blowing up, it spewed a stream of burning powder and singed the right side of Luke's face. One of the little neighborhood boys jumped up and ran to the house where my mother was talking to his mother, yelling all the way, "Mom, that boy done got blowed up. Mom, that boy done got blowed up."
Oh dear.
I'm Tom Wright. That's my young bride right there. Hold up your hand. Gretchen. I've written a number of memoirs about her, but I'm not going to go into those right now. This one is One Man's Trash is Another's Treasure. It all began when my middle school grandson from Hillsborough, North Carolina, came to visit in Mississippi. We went fishing and he caught a spotted gar that turned out to be a state record. It also set an International Game Fishing Association land record. Although I'm a fishery biologist, we went to the net so he could learn all about a gar. How many of you have seen a gar? Just a few. Anyway, they're a prehistoric fish that's been around 200 million years. They're beautiful. They're long cylindrical fish shaped like a torpedo. They're alligator gar, short nose, long nose, and spotted. Not very many people can tell a spotted from a short nose. You have to count the fin rays and the lateral line scales. Gar are edible, but they're pain to clean. The usual method is to cut off the head with an axe and use heavy tin snips to cut along the belly. The scales are made of ganoin, a material very similar to tooth enamel. They have an ivory appearance. While on the net, I noticed a URL for gar scales wanted. Curious, I opened it. I learned about jewel trees. These are miniature trees made of gold or silver wire, twisted to resemble little trees. Jewels are added to simulate leaves and flowers. Obviously, they're quite expensive and used in shadow boxes and as mantle ornaments. Less expensive models are made of copper or nickel wire, and gar scales substitute for jewels. Gar scales are also used for jewelry, such as necklaces, bracelets, and earrings. They readily take a dye, and both dyed or plain are very lustrous and striking. I called the 800 number and found out that $5 a pound was being offered, depending on size and condition. I knew that large numbers of gar and other fish congregated below the floodgates at Steel Bayou, a Mississippi River tributary. Unfortunately, my grandson had returned to North Carolina, so I loaded my fishing gear in my pickup and set forth for the bayou. Upon arriving, I found that the entire area was littered with gar carcasses in various states of decay, which did not affect the teeth and the scales at all. There is clearly no point in fishing. I put on work gloves and started loading a 5-gallon plastic pail with the carcasses. As it filled, I emptied it into the bed of my trunk.
I received curious glances from nearby fishermen, but no one came near to ask what I was doing. With the truck essentially full, I headed for home and began pondering how to separate the scales from the mess. I had planned to skin the guard and place the scales on fire ant beds, but I doubted that fire ants would be interested in the mess that I had. I stopped for gas at a service station. A cloud of flies came out of nowhere and enveloped the truck, and black slime was oozing out under the tailgate. The odor was almost indescribable. Several nearby customers seemed to be choking, so I quickly left. On the way home, it occurred to me to put the scales and all in burlap bags, submerge them in a pond for bacteria and microscopic aquatic critters to do the work. There was no concern that this would affect the scales any more than they would teeth. Gretchen was out of town at a home health nurse meeting. Was not due home till the next day. I parked in the driveway and went to bed. Her meeting was over early, and I was rudely awakened in the middle of the night. I tried to explain, but I was told that the truck and I would depart immediately. I got burlap bags and a shovel, went to Friend's farm pond. By dawn, the bags were in the water and soaking. When I got home, Gretchen said a neighbor had come over and commented about a terrible odor last night, and thought it might be a dead animal in the shrubbery. I spent a couple of hours scrubbing the tailgate slime and maggots off the driveway. I retrieved the bags a month later and dumped the contents in pails. Nothing left but vertebrae, ribs, scales, and fin rays. Washed with a hose and spread on a screen to dry. Spent hours picking out scales. It took six packs to go through all of them. There was still some gunky stuff stuck on the scales. So I bought some 5-gallon plastic drums. Put the scales in with fine sand, a few cups of Clorox and water. Tucked those in the back of the truck and let them roll around for about a month. When I took them out, the scales were perfectly clean and shiny. I sent off 35 pounds of scales, received a check for $175 plus postage. I think I came out a little ahead, but since it was all done in spare time, included with the check was a nice letter from the buyer complimenting me on the extremely high quality of the scales. He looked forward to receiving more, as his previous supplier had gone on welfare. I later processed some scales on anthills from gar that I caught, but I never got up the nerve to go for another big haul. The truck never did smell the same afterwards. In case you're wondering about the title, the Mississippi Delta is the most poverty-stricken place in the United States. A colleague commented I was the only person he knew that could make a profit off of something that's thrown away by folks on the Delta.
Thank you all so much again for coming. Hope you enjoyed it. Snacks, refreshments, and some drinks are available in the cafe if you want to gather there. Right now, Kevin's got everything all set up for us, and just continue to enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks to Input for great questions.